Okay, let's start with this. If you're expecting any kind of consistency from this channel, you've got another thing coming. This is my channel, and it's shit anyway, so if one day I want to accuse someone of being a rapist, and the next day I want to talk about a single cartoon character for about an hour, that's what I'm gonna do. This is a garbage channel anyway, your expectations are far too high anyways, okay? Now, the second thing I want to say is that some of you were not really happy about my giant audio spikes in the last video. So to anyone who's bothered by this, I just like to say, I'm sorry! With that out of the way, let's get to the show, okay? Lately, I've been watching a lot of cartoons, trying to catch up with this recent cartoon renaissance that has been going on for the last few years. And doing this eventually led me to Adventure Time. Now, the show itself wasn't bad. It had a lot of the same problems that I thought Steven Universe had, but to a much more limited degree. And plus, at the end of the day, I think that if I had kids, I would rather they were indoctrinated by some boring person with his stale, stupid philosophical musings than by a woman who wants him to cut his dick off. But the thing I really want to talk about here is the show's villain. No, not that one. No, not that one. Who even is this? Yeah, that one, that's the one. Okay, so right now you might be saying, hold on, Princess Bubblegum isn't the villain of Adventure Time? Well, here we disagree, because I think that she is worse than pretty much 90% of all the characters, and I am almost 100% sure that by the end of the show the big twist will be that she was actually evil all along. What makes me think that? Well, let's go over this together. Let's go over a short list of some of the worst things she's done throughout the show, okay? So in the first episode of the show, she created a zombie potion that was supposed to bring people back to life, but then almost destroyed the entire kingdom in an apocalypse. A few episodes later, she learned nothing from this and tried to do this all over again. In the first episode, she seemingly perfected this potion, and still she never uses it to revive anyone, instead lets them die and then clones them in secret. At one point doing this 25 times to a single character before banishing him to live in the desert because he's too annoying. She seems to often create new sentient lives and then decide for them who they will marry and with whom they'll live for the rest of their lives. She almost committed genocide by secretly freezing the core of the Fire Kingdom in an episode where one background character seemingly died on screen because of her actions, all to get access to the Fire Kingdom's weapons of mass destruction, despite she herself having the exact same weapons of mass destruction and having them working 24 hours a day to protect her kingdom. On top of that, she helped the Fire King construct a prison cell to contain his 2-year-old daughter in it for the rest of her life. And she's in fact so awful that there's at least one underground resistance group trying to keep track of her, and not everyone even recognizes the legitimacy of her rule. What she does to counteract that is spy on these people and also literally every single person in the entire kingdom. Not only that, but she also spies on the leaders of rival nations. And even though she decided to stop spying on people with cameras at one point, it turns out in an episode that happens far into the future that she replaced this with spying on them with implants she puts in their teeth to keep track of their movement at all times. Now, the chronology of this is kind of hazy, so you can't tell what happened first, but what is certain from this episode that happens far into the future is that at some point in the future she traps everyone in her kingdom in little balls and then carries them around the wasteland in prison in a giant robot. And speaking of robots, she also created a sentient race of police robots who are so good at their job that they eradicated crime. But because she programmed them to exist solely for the purpose of fighting, which is completely her fault, they began to fight each other in secret tournaments. Now, despite the fact that there is no crime in the city and that they're hurting absolutely no one by doing this, she brings them all into a single place, uses the fact that they're completely loyal to her to make half of them turn around and face the wall, and then kills the other half like that serial killer from the Blair Witch Project. Then she has the other half turn around and kills them too. And then when it turns out that one of them has escaped and has been living in a dump for probably decades without hurting anyone, and despite the fact that he is still 100% loyal to her, her first thought of what to do with this guy is to immediately kill him. Now, after this little genocide, she replaces all the robot guards with pretty much useless banana guards instead of just, reprogramming the robots instead of killing them. Because of course they're completely sentient, this was definitely a genocide. But this is not the last time she does something like this. No, in a different episode she creates Goliath, a super intelligent, basically transcendent being with superpowers that's supposed to help her run the kingdom. But because she fucks it up and lets her 13-year-old friend take care of him, he learns how to be a giant dictator. So what does she do? She creates a second superior being to sacrifice itself to trap both of them forever in a giant sort of mind prison. But at this point you should be asking yourself, hold on, why did the first god monster turn into a horrible dictator and now the second one? Well, interestingly, she used some of Finn's DNA in the second monster, which turned it into a hero. But whose DNA did she use in the first one who turned into an evil dictator? Alright, it was hers. And you know, she really does seem like a dictator, because in one plotline, the entire world is divided into 4 kingdoms because of some magical mistake, and then the rulers of the 4 kingdoms, one of them being Princess Bubblegum, turn into the representation of their element. Now, all the other kingdoms are fine, but Princess Bubblegum is the only one who turns people into candy people against their will, and then at some point just decides to take over the other 3 kingdoms. And it turns out in one of the latest episodes of the show that the reason all of the Candy Kingdom inhabitants are so happy-go-lucky and stupid is because Princess Bubblegum uses a chemical to sort of mind control them into being dumb and happy all the time, which is like something out of a sci-fi novel. Hell, even when she's sitting around doing nothing, she's creating tiny candy people and then absent-mindedly cutting off their limbs. Okay, so at this point let's stop for a moment. Let's not talk about all the awful things she's done and ask ourselves this. Is she really the villain? I mean, some of you may be thinking, hold on, other people in the show are so much worse than Princess Bubblegum. But let's examine that, okay? Who exactly is worse than Princess Bubblegum? Who's the villain here? Is it Ice King? Not really. Ice King's just a senile old man. What about Magic Man? He's kind of a jerk. No, he gets redeemed eventually. This vampire guy, for example? No, he accepts his fate and basically lets people kill him because he understands that being evil just causes more destruction somehow. His motivations aren't exactly clear here. I don't really know who's worse than Princess Bubblegum in the show. Out of all the countless minor villains and big ones too, Princess Bubblegum appears to be the worst person. Okay, so what about the Lich? I mean, surely the Lich is worse than Princess Bubblegum, right? No, not really. You know, in one episode it's revealed that the Lich is basically an automaton. When there's no one to kill, he just sits around and does nothing. It seems like he can't really control himself, doesn't it? He is the personification of evil, but he has no real control over his actions. He can't choose not to be an asshole. He has to kill people. That's what he exists for. Princess Bubblegum, on the other hand, actively chooses to play God, creates new life just to destroy it, and then rules whatever's left with an iron fist in some sort of giant nightmare state. And speaking of nightmarish dictatorships, let's talk for a second about the worst thing Princess Bubblegum has ever done, which is literally anything having to do with Lemongrab. So let's go over the entire Lemongrab saga real quick here for a second, okay? Princess Bubblegum creates a living, breathing abomination in her basement that sees her as its mother or possibly its god, and is incapable of anything besides loneliness and suffering. Then she gets sick of this thing and decides to banish it to an abandoned castle in the middle of nowhere so she doesn't have to look at him anymore. All of this because he's really annoying and acts like a mildly autistic socialist.
Castle Lemongrab has no citizens! You have excess candies! You must donate! Donate!
Now years later, this thing comes back complaining that he's all alone and incapable of relating to anyone because, well, that's how she created him. So she rounds up a number of small children, despite knowing that Lemongrab is insane and known for imprisoning and torturing people, and sends them off to live with him so he wouldn't be so lonely. At this point, he immediately locks them in a cell and starts electrocuting them. And a few days later, Princess Bubblegum remembers that maybe it wasn't a good idea to leave a bunch of 8-year-olds in the hands of the Spanish Inquisition. So she comes back to rescue them, but then she creates a second Lemongrab so that the first one won't be so lonely, so now that there are 2 of these poor miserable creatures running around instead of 1. On her way out, however, she haphazardly forgets the formula for creating life and leaves it on her kitchen table. And what they do next is turn all of their food into an army of even more deformed lemon people who are all starving and suffering to the point of cannibalism. Jesus Christ, he is a socialist. So instead of saving them or at least putting them out of their misery like she should have done, something she had no problem doing with an entire race of robots and even these giant transcendent creatures who are closer to human beings and maybe surpass human beings, certainly more so than any of the Lemongrabs, and maybe even putting the Lemongrabs themselves out of their misery because they're clearly in a lot of pain here. They're basically suffering all the time because they're fucking autistic, let's be honest. Instead of doing any of this, she deletes the information about how to create life from their brains and then just leaves them like this. Even though she admits that they are completely incapable of being any way other than how she created them, which is selfish and evil. And of course this leads to them creating a giant dictatorship. So after she fucks off, they inevitably turn the entire place into a dictatorial hellscape once again, where the people are starving and any opposition is cruelly oppressed. Instead of fixing this, Bubblegum refuses to break an imaginary peace treaty that she has with these childlike, disgusting mutants that she herself created, which she shouldn't have any kind of legal obligations towards, but maybe some moral obligations to finally save them from themselves. And instead, she kidnaps a small child and decides to indoctrinate him into doing her work for her. Now this doesn't work out at first, but eventually the child comes back and kills Lemongrab, and instead of just leaving him dead, finally letting him rest in peace, free from the suffering of this world, even though the child that saved the people in the first place says he's not gonna help him again, she revives him again. And of course the expected happens. Lemongrab comes back to life, and after she fucks off, enslaves everyone and creates another North Korea. Seriously, they're all yellow. This has to be a metaphor for communist China. It's too many coincidences. I can't be imagining this. Come on. So that's basically my conclusion. Look, I'm not saying that Princess Bubblegum is Hitler, okay? I'm saying she's Dr. Mangala. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video and want to experience more jarring shifts in tone, upload schedule, and theme, then feel free to subscribe to me here, or better yet, subscribe to my VidMe channel so I can move all this shit over there before I inevitably get banned from this website. Oh, and also Princess Bubblegum keeps her disabled retarded brother in a dungeon where he sucks on tree roots and she harvests his boob sweat.